Well, to talk a little more then about these final days of campaigning, I'm pleased to welcome to the programme Thomas Gift. He's the director of the Centre on US Politics at University College London. Good to talk to you this afternoon.
Good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Look, first of all, on this saga around the word garbage, Trump trying to capitalise on the story. We saw him in that report dressed like a sanitation worker, even sitting briefly in the front of a garbage truck himself. This, of course, even though it was racist comments made by one of his supporters that sparked this whole conversation. Look, do you think this is a good strategy for Donald Trump?
I do think that it's a good strategy for Donald Trump because it's what he has. And Donald Trump is a showman, and there's nothing more showman-like than what he has been doing in recent days, being at a McDonald's, serving French fries to consumers, getting on a trash truck and running around. I mean, it's hard to believe that we've been in this election cycle seemingly forever, for essentially the last 2 years. And we're a week here before the actual voting, and all we can talk about is garbage. That's really the unfortunate aspect of all this.
Well, that's not something that Kamala Harris wants us to be talking about, though, is it? She's trying to distance herself from this story. Her messaging in the past couple of days appears to be, look, Donald Trump is unstable. He's a threat to democracy. What do you make of that from her as a closing argument of this campaign?
I don't think that's a winning argument for Kamala Harris, simply because if you look at the data, about 60 to 70% of Americans think that democracy in America is at risk, but only about 3% prioritize it as a number one issue in this election. So I think it's largely preaching to the choir. And there are plenty of Republicans who think that actually it's Kamala Harris who represents the threat to democracy. So I think it's just as likely to backfire. So I think that Harris, if she were trying to court these swing voters, the small and vanishing number of swing voters, she really has to talk about policy. She has to talk about immigration. She has to talk about abortion. She has to talk about the economy, simply because I don't think that those individuals who are on the fence really resonate with this idea of democracy being at stake.
I suppose the challenge for Kamala Harris with some of those issues you mentioned there, the economy, immigration, is, of course, she is part of the current administration that has overseen the policies that are in place right now. So how can Kamala Harris at this stage try to distance herself from the Biden administration and say, actually, on those key issues that matter to voters, I do represent a break in terms of the economy and in terms of immigration?
Well, on the economy, she's talked a lot about this opportunity economy that she wants to foster, which includes $6,000 tax credit for families with newborns, which includes $25,000 of down payment assistance, which includes raising the corporate tax rate and using some of that money to give tax breaks to the middle class. So she has to have a pat response to how she would differ from the Biden administration. Of course, she is invariably tied to what Biden has done, the successes and the failures, but she does need to sort of be more specific on this issue. Immigration, I think, is definitely a tough issue. At the very least, she needs to neutralize Trump's advantage on that particular issue. You know, she has talked about increasing technology to identify fentanyl. She has sort of talked about different ways that she wants to improve border security. But again, not a lot of specificity. But, you know, there's still 4 or 5 days left. Maybe she could be specific about some of these issues.
Well, I did want to ask you about some of the specifics, actually, because it strikes me that there have been a lot of personal attacks in the course of this campaign. Sexist language by Donald Trump. Harris, as I say, describing Trump as unstable. But what about actual policies? Because is it fair to say that actually this has been a campaign period rather light, actually, on policy? On substance?
I think that's absolutely a fair characterization. And you're right. Anytime you have an election with Donald Trump, a lot of it is going to be ad hominem. A lot of it is going to be personal. And I think for Kamala Harris, it does make sense to kind of make this election a referendum on Donald Trump. But at the same time, it can't be the only thing that she is running on. Her sort of entire platform cannot just be, I'm not Donald Trump. We know that Trump does this, right? He mudslings, he, makes false accusations, he sort of demeans and disparages people. So that's sort of par for the course for him. And part of that does resonate with the MAGA base. But you're right. It's unfortunate that, in an election with this much at stake, there has been so little talk on policy and so much about personality.
Just a final question for you. France 24 and news channels around the world are preparing for their coverage for Election Day and the day after. Given how close the polls suggest this election will be, is it your sense that we will know the results soon, or is this going to be dragged out for days, even weeks?
Just based on the polling, I would say that it's going to be dragged out for days and even weeks. Last time in 2020, we didn't have the election results, of course, the night of. I think that this is going to be very similar. The polls show an even closer race. In some states, there's actually going to be sort of automatic recounts if the vote margin is so small. In other states, we may see the Trump or Harris campaigns try to litigate, challenge the election outcomes. And so I think that the odds that we know on November 6th, the day after the election, are very, very slim at this point.
Thomas Gift talking to us live there from University College London. He's the director of the Centre on US Politics there. Thanks very much.
Thanks.